Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our community forum honoring all voices, exploring respect, fairness, and inclusion in Lake County. At times, people commonly feel as if they are not heard, that they are marginalized, and in many cases, people do not feel as if things will ever get to that point. Therefore, we have committed to conducting these forums to allow for these opportunities and discussions so they can take place. Many people feel only one set of voices are only heard, and that they overshadow their voices. So it is futile to attend events like this. A lot of times people just don't understand each other. And so this is why it is imperative that we conduct these meetings, so that we can all understand each other and get each other's perspectives understood as well. One thing I know for sure is that all humans have the same behavior. My time serving in the military, my time serving my local tribe, and now my experience with working in county government, I've noticed and recognized the similarities of all human nature. So I look forward to tonight's forum and more to come. Now, I would like to introduce Joanne Sacato, who will speak to the grassroots efforts that ultimately led to this evening's forum.
Hi, welcome in. Thank you. Find a spot. Thank you, EJ. And thank you, everyone. So my name is Joanne Sacato. I use the pronouns she, her, and I reside in the the ancestral and present-day lands of the Wapo and the Lake Miwok, which is also known as Cobb Mountain. And I just want to take note for those of us that are here in person tonight. Welcome in. Hi, Sally. That we are here in Lakeport, and I would like to just acknowledge the fuller history of that. So we are on the ancestral and present-day lands of the northern and the eastern Pomo nations and people. And so just take a moment and feel your feet on the ground, on the earth, and recognize the history that goes far, far back. And I just want to say how grateful I feel to be able to be on this land in this moment. I'd also like to acknowledge the shoulders of the work, those that we stand upon to be here tonight. And of course, everyone that has ever lifted a finger or made any effort to address diversity, equity, and inclusion in their own communities over the generations, we are standing on their shoulders. But I want to acknowledge the local shoulders that we're standing on that are bringing us this particular path to this particular moment. And the first of those is I'd like to acknowledge Clovis Lewis, who is here in the room with us. Clovis, can you raise your hand? And so during the time of George Floyd's brutal murder, Clovis had the bravery to bring his story of being a black boy and a black man growing up and living in America. And it was out of that bravery that prompted his wife, Carol Cole Lewis, can you raise your hand? She's here as well. And myself to kind of figure out, well, is this happening here and what can we do about it? So we started a grassroots effort called Community Call to Action, a loving response to systemic racism in America. And many people answered that call, too many to name this evening. But if you were part of the CCA, can you raise your hand right now that did the work in that grassroots effort? And hopefully the folks on Zoom are doing that as well. So just want to acknowledge that. And I want to acknowledge two initiatives that arose out of that, even though there was a lot of work that arose out of it, but two particular initiatives. One was a collaborative effort between Clovis Lewis and the Middletown Arts Center with Lisa Kaplan, who is online with us tonight. And that was the Sounds of Liberation, a series of interviews with and musical interludes with our Black music artists here in Lake County. And it was a very powerful, moving experience. And I believe that you can access those on the Middletown Arts Center's website if you'd like to see that series. But the other initiative that came out of the CCA was work towards a proclamation, which is actually on your table tonight. For those of us that are here in person, and I can't remember if there's access on Zoom to that, but it is on the county webpage for the Community Vision Forum Planning Committee. But I'd like to acknowledge Anna Ravenwood, who was on that subcommittee with me for the CCA, and particularly to acknowledge Supervisor Bruno Sabatier. He helped co-craft the proclamation, and it was his inspiration that invited it to be positive, oriented, and forward-thinking. And that was brilliant, because at a time when it's real easy to say what's going wrong, Bruno really wanted us to focus on where can we go from here and make it into what we really want it to be. So I really want to honor him for that. So now before I pass this off, and you're going to learn more about the history of this path that we're on tonight, I'd just like to invite you to jump in with me and be ready to be caught learning together. And what I mean by that is that we are in new territory here. We are learning how to be, who to be together, and how we can do this in a new way that includes all of us, and it's about all of us, and it's for all of us. So what do I mean by that? Caught learning together. Well, because we're in this new way of being, we're going to make a lot of missteps. There's going to be oopses and ouches. I can tell you I've made hundreds, if not thousands already. And for the grace of people that have been willing to tell me that those missteps are considered disrespectful or dishonoring, I am so grateful. My invitation is that if you notice that from my behavior, please call me in on it. Let me know, because I want to learn how to be as respectful and loving and kind and caring to you as I possibly can. And then I want to invite everybody to jump in and be brave and say, okay, we're going to get caught learning. Let's do this together. So that invitation is out there. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and pass it off to Matthew Rothstein, who is our Deputy County Administrative Officer here for the County of Lake. And he has been so heartfelt and instrumental from moving the proclamation and the ad hoc committee to this point. It's been amazing, and I am so honored to be able to be by his side and work with him. So thank you, welcome, and Matthew.
So I'm Matthew Rothstein, Deputy County Administrative Officer, and I wanted to just, before I go any further, say truly, Joanne, it's an honor to follow your comments this evening. Joanne has been an extraordinarily focused and dedicated contributor to the countywide efforts that have made tonight's event possible. So thank you, Joanne, for that important work in carrying us this far. As many will be aware, on February 23, 2021, the Lake County Board of Supervisors unanimously proclaimed promoting tolerance, respect, equity, and inclusion among their highest priorities. The County Administrative Office was pleased to partner with community members and supervisors in development of this historic item, which saw each member of the board read a portion of the proclamation. Additionally, the Board of Supervisors committed to taking action, including hosting public conversations such as tonight's forum to hear the experiences and priorities of local residents in the following categories: meaningful actions and activities that will build bridges where there may be walls, fostering tolerance, respect, understanding, equity, and inclusion, promoting nonviolence and nonviolent conflict resolution, focusing resources on underlying causes and conditions that lead to inequitable resource and justice distribution, and relevant solutions for any social injustices as they may come to light. Following that historic proclamation, community members and leaders from the County of Lake, cities of Clear Lake and Lakeport, tribal governments, and others formed the Community Visioning Forum Planning Committee. And tonight's event was ultimately through that committee planned and supported by dozens of people, formal committee members, and many, many others. And I'm so pleased and moved to see so many of you who have been in Zoom with us these months here tonight. Thank you for all that you each contributed. And as I say oftentimes in our meetings, one thing that I'm struck consistently by is how we have contributions from each person contributing that only you could have made. So thank you for that, and I know that that will continue here tonight, and appreciate the safe space that we're all co-creating for that to happen. I also want to say that many thanks are due to Stephanie Griffin and Cynthia Dominguez, who are generously leading provision of childcare for tonight's event, and also Chairman Cromwell and Robinson Rancheria for providing snacks and water to help sustain the important conversation. And I also want to thank our interpreters. We have Gilbert from Equilingual, and I'm sorry, but who's joining you in Zoom? Janet Perez. And so we're very excited to have Equilingual supporting language accessibility for this forum, and also Jenna and Vernice from Pro Bono ASL. And we decided, I think we wanted to make sure that even if we didn't have people who registered for this event in person tonight that had asked for these language accessibility options, that we made them available anyway, because that will help make sure that this information is accessible to people moving forward as well. And there may be people who aren't here tonight, but nonetheless will access this information ultimately. So we're really grateful for the support that's being provided.
Matthew, can we make a quick announcement to those, find out who needs Spanish translation? Would that be okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Por favor, Janet, tenemos traduciendo para español. Si necesitas que traducir, por favor, dame un mensaje, o tenemos la señora Janet que se va a dar unas palabras también. Janet, would you mind?
Yes. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Janet Pérez. Como mencioné a las personas que están conectadas en Zoom, envío un mensaje si necesitan traducciones al español. Por favor, que me diera su nombre a través del chat para crear un grupo. Okay, gracias. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with thanks to the Lake County Board of Supervisors and the Clear Lake and Lakeport City Councils for their financial support, it's now my privilege to introduce to you our lead facilitator for this evening's event, Ms. Nicole Anderson. Nicole and her team have been indispensable leaders in the movement to promote cultural competency and greater understanding in communities, school districts, local governments, and other organizations across the state of California and beyond. Nicole, welcome, and we're truly grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. I'm gonna try that again. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I came all the way from the beautiful space of Vallejo, California, and am truly honored, as Joanna, you had shared about the land you stand on. As an African-American woman, I often reflect and love land acknowledgements because we're still learning in our culture, often those who are African-American, of where our land is, right, and what that land looks like. But I'm honored to have land to walk on and to really honor the space and share it with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And so I actually live very close to a space, Blue Rock Springs Park, which is home to the coastal Miwoks, I believe, the Susanese, and also the Patwins. And so just honored in a space to just see that you're honoring culture. So thank you. And just want to honor all of our ancestors who aren't here with us, but are proud of the work that we're advancing for many who cannot see where we are to this day, and having these amazing conversations about equity, about justice, about fairness, about inclusion. And so as those of you, many of you are in the room, we've gotten to hang out together, right, on Zoom. And it's finally good to see you in person and just get to share, break a little bread, right? And just get to share in conversations today. So we're going to do a few introductions, and then we're going to jump right in and give a little context to what the conversation will be about today in our community forum. And then we're going to have a chance to come together, do a little bit of discussion with you as teams, and then you're going to do some sharing out And hopefully we will also have our community who is joining either Facebook Live or joining via YouTube to also participate through a survey so that they can also share their voices as well. And so I am joined by my amazing colleague, Dr. Shelley Jones-Holt, who you can see Dr. Holt's on the screen. She is going to be our Zoom facilitator. She has been with us also helping to facilitate our conversations with the committee, and just super honored to be here to support the process. To everyone who has joined us today, I want to just pause for a moment and do some introductions, if that's okay. So we're going to do this really quickly. We're just going to go around and say our name, particularly our first name, if that's okay, how you pronounce that, and also the role you play in the community, right? Who do you represent? Okay, and so what I would like to do is to make sure that I know our group is on Zoom is muted, but if they can do their introductions, it would be great to include them as well because they did join, and then we're going to do our Zoom around the room, okay? And so Dr. Holt, if we can just go ahead and have each of our participants just quickly unmute, just 10-second introduction, name, and their role they play.
Let's see them.
Go ahead, David Rose.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're Dave and Rose. Well, I'm Rose Gack.
And I'm Dave.
Mm-hmm.
And we're retired educators and have been living in the county for over 40 years.
All right.
Thank you so much. Lisa, would you mind going next? And then we'll come to you, Mr. Luris.
Sure. I'm Lisa Kaplan. I'm an artist and an art educator, and I guess I sort of represent the art sector.
Thank you so much. Mr. Luris, please go ahead and share.
Dolores Farrell, community member.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you here. Miss Alma.
Alma Ingram, Redwood Coast Regional Center.
Pleasure to have you here. Carolyn Burley. Carolyn Barilli is the Assistant Curator for the Museums of Lake County and the California Association of Museums Board, specifically the DEAI Task Force. Thank you, Carolyn, so much. David Farrell.
My husband.
I know, where is he? Where'd he go?
Community member.
Awesome. Well, thank you for introducing him. Greta Ziet, and please forgive me if I didn't get that correctly. Greta, okay, looks like Greta's on messing right now. Jill Ruzicka.
Work for the Lake County Office of Education, and I do policy and government affairs and legislative work for them.
Thank you so much. So glad you're here. Jim Leonardis.
Yes, I am a retired farmer, been in the county for about 20 years, and glad to be participating.
Awesome, thank you. And have some of the most awesome hair. I've just been loving the hair as we've been on the Zoom. And then going to Kate Schmidt-Hopper.
Hello, yes, I'm Kate Schmidt-Hopper, and I am the District 1 Chair for the Resource Conservation District, and happy to be here talking about people and hopefully the land as well.
Thank you. Margot Cambara.
Hello, I am a full-time resident of Lake County for the past 18 years, just a community member.
More than just, but thank you so much for being here. And finally, I think this is the last person, but forgive me if, let me know if I missed anyone. Michael Marks.
Good evening. I'm a proud Lake County resident, and I am the vice chairman of the Habematol Pomov Upper Lake. Glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So glad to have you here. And this is going to be very interesting. Miss Angela Cuellar Marroquin is coming in, and as they're coming in, I don't want to scare you. Angela, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hi, how are you? We just did introductions and you came in right when I was on the last person. So I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and what role you play in the community.
Okay, I'm gonna leave my camera off because I am on the East Coast and almost ready for bed. So, I just wanted to say hello, Angela Cuellar Marroquin. I am the Child Care Planning Council Director at the Lake County Office of Ed, the President of Latinos United of Lake County. And I'm also a part-time instructor at both Mendocino College and Woodland Community College. And I'm just so happy that I was able to kind of be part of this work. And unfortunately, I'm not there to be in person, and it was my goal. But I'm at an awesome Wellville gathering over on the East Coast, even trying to make Lake County even better. So sorry I couldn't be there, guys.
No problem. We are so glad you're here, and I totally understand. I'm on the East Coast as well, so I totally understand, but we're so glad you're here. All right, and I think that's everyone. Please speak up if I missed you, and I'll transfer it back over to Nicole.
Hi.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi.
Greta.
I think you.
Oh, Greta, you're back.
I'm sorry.
Hi.
I'm back. I'm sorry. Somebody drove into my driveway just a minute ago. I had to go away. I'm so sorry.
No worries. Just
I'm
tell us
Greta.
who you are and what your role is in the community.
Right.
Thank you for being here.
I'm Greta Zeit. My name is Greta Zeit, and I am the secretary of the local chapter of the NAACP, and I'm representing the chapter on this committee. And I also own and operate a bed and breakfast here in Middletown. I've been here for 28 years.
Pleasure to have you here, and thank you for representing the NAACP. All right, and I think that's everyone.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to go ahead and keep the introductions going. And so just, again, your first name and who you represent in the community. So we'll start with this table here, and we'll just whip around if that's okay. All right.
Really loud? No, you're good.
Just pass the mic. Pass the mic.
Because you're going to have to speak to the East Coast.
Do I just talk like this?
Yep, you're good.
I'm apparently mic challenged. That's my first admission. Meredith Noyer, Lake County Probation.
Perfect.
I'll pass the mic.
Wendy Monfrance, Chief Probation Officer.
I'm Georgina Marie Cordado, the Lake County Poet Laureate and Literacy Program Coordinator for the Lake County Library.
Buenas tardes, Ana Santana, Lake County Office of Education and Latinos United of Lake County.
My name is Margie, and I represent individual voices and those that do not wish to be lumped.
Again, Matthew Rothstein, County Administrative Office, County of Lake.
Good evening. My name is Benaiah Kim Cromwell. I'm the current chairman of Robinson Rancheria.
Good evening. My name's Colleen Pete, and I'm a tribal member, elder of Robinson Rancheria, retired secretary treasurer for Robinson.
Hi, good evening. I'm Julie. I work for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. My region covers Lake County. I also happen to be a resident here. I'm really new. I've been here 2 years. I lived in LA for 40 years. So big change, but I've been working towards inclusion of people with developmental disabilities for my entire career, 35 years now.
Aminihi, Hioni, Kalakdak, Kawika, Williokmi, Middletown, Kawika, Kotsata. My name is Sally Peterson. I am an enrolled member at Middletown Rancheria. I'm a tribal elder of Middletown. I'm Lake Miwok and Pomo from Habemato and Lake Miwok from Middletown. I served my tribe the last 16 years on tribal council as vice chair and active member of South Lake County, and also on the executive board for the Sierra Club, and I work for Big Valley Rancheria, and I think that's enough. Thank you. Kawika.
I'm Alan. I've been a settler for about 10 years. I live in Lucerne. I've been involved with radio, theater, folk music, and we have a little project you'll be hearing about in a couple of few months.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. EJ Crandall. I am on the Board of Supervisors. I served before as a tribal council member. I was the previous chair to Chairman Cromwell. My ancestors are from the area that I serve as the supervisor, so it's a real honor for me to be able to represent the area. And I also have native blood from Hopland as well. So I'm glad that everyone's here, and I think I'll stop there.
Dale Stobie, I'm a lieutenant with the Lakeport Police Department and a 44-year resident of Lake County.
And I'm Brad Rasmussen. I'm the chief of police for the city of Lakeport. I have lived in the community and been in law enforcement here for the last 34 years.
My name is Sandy Orwig, and I'm a resident of Lake County.
My name's Rick Orwig, and I'm Sandy's husband.
I'm Clovis Lewis, Unitarian Universalist minister, and cellist and educator, composer. So I'm in the arts part too. So.
Hello, everybody. I'm Carol Cole Lewis. I am Clovis's wife, and I am here representing as past president and past board member of the Unitarian Universalist community of Lake County.
My name is Barbara Christwitz, and I'm with a volunteer organization called Citizens Caring for Clear Lake. We pick up litter and illegal dump sites, and we say that we're a front for building community, because that's what it's really about.
Excellent, thank you. We're an official.
Hi, I think everybody knows I'm Joanne Saccato. I use the pronoun she, her. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for Lake and Mendocino Counties for the NorCal for Health Project. Let's see, I also sit on the executive committee for the Sierra Club. And I just want to take a minute to say, if you served on the ad hoc committee, the Community Vision Forum Planning Committee, could you please raise your hand so that we can see the members of that community that are serving on that community? Okay, great, thank you.
Perfect, perfect.
Buenas tardes, Gilberto para los que hablan español. Good afternoon, Gilbert for those who speak English. Estoy con una empresa que se llama Colingo. Se trata de una empresa de equidad a través del lenguaje. I'm with a company that I own called Ecolingo, where we try to achieve equity through language.
Yeah, powerful, thank you. Excellent. All right, you can see there's some power in this room. I got to get it together, huh? Wow, this is amazing. Well, I just appreciate, also want to acknowledge Sam, who has been the tech guru behind the scenes. Thank you, Sam, for all of the work you're doing to make this happen. And so what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into the work. I know you all are anxious to get rolling on having a discussion. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what it means to really honor all voices, right? And really to unpack what this looks like. And so we'll have some guiding questions. We just really want to talk about this particular, I think, topic that's near and dear to all of us, but also recognize we want to set a little bit of a condition and space for us to do that together. And also know that this is not the last of the community visioning forums, that we will have 2 more planned. And today is kind of an opportunity just to show what that structure could look like. And obviously you see there's a lot of people who are not in the room with us today, which is okay, but you have more opportunities to continue. And ultimately the goal is that you really do these all the time. Right, that this is an opportunity. We understand and recognize the challenge of this beautiful space that we live in Lake County, and know that people are rather spread out and not able to always access the space. So I'm thankful for the Zoom opportunity, but also thinking about, very clearly, how do we bring this to our community members who do have a voice and just may not have felt safe to come just yet. And I want to honor them, because sometimes that is the case. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what it means, but I want to give a couple of just a little bit of what our purpose is today. And so, as you all know, you've spent, about a year now, I would say? Would you say about a year working on this? Those of you on the committee? It's been a little while, huh? And so part of the purpose when y'all came together, obviously the proclamation, which is sitting on the tables for you to reference, is kind of what sparked a lot of this. But the purpose in coming together is really what you see on the screen is really the safe space, and keyword safe, okay? It's important as facilitators that we provide a space that people feel they won't be judged or be blamed or shamed for past history, but also that we acknowledge history and know that where there may be pain, there may be discomfort. And so it's important that it's a safe space. And so we often as facilitators want this space to be safe so the community can, one, learn, right? Because we don't know everything, we want to discuss, and that's going to be important, but also to share these stories because there are different perspectives. Even though there may be the boxes and labels that people may mark on the census data, we have different perspectives, and I think it's very important to unpack that. So the goal today is to really create a safe space, and I'll unpack that in a second. But ultimately, the outcomes, this is about data collection. So those of you on the committee, remember we talked about data, right? We had a lot of quantitative data. We had data around your health disparities, right? We talked about education. There's so many spaces you can talk about the quantitative data, those pretty charts, those things that tell us the conditions of our community. But also that data doesn't tell us about people's feelings and experiences. And so it is important today that we collect data, what we call qualitative, which is more about experiences, perceptions, which then can help us really be informed on what do we do next in terms of actions. Okay, very important to think about that. And then today's a chance just to listen. Right, we're going to listen. I know many of you are in spaces of what we call power, right, positions of power. And it's very important that when we're in positions of power that we listen to what may support and inform our work because we know that in positions of power we are able to make decisions, right? And so it is important to have an opportunity to listen, but also for people who have perspective about how systems work, right? People have to enforce the system, have to enforce laws and any type of statutes. The reality is that we also want to listen to learn about how the system works. A lot of times people who don't have a voice are subjected to a system and don't know how to navigate it. They don't know how to change it. They don't know how to influence it. And so some ways we love this because there's a chance to share stories about how the system works. I'm an educator. Dr. Holt's an educator. That's how we were kind of born into this work. And this work transcends across all industries. But what I recognize is that as educators, we have to teach, right? And that we have to recognize that everyone may not know how to navigate this system, okay, in multiple systems, okay? And so what I want to do is I want to unpack that conversation about safe. And I know some of you may have thought like, okay, we have these conversations about fairness and equity, diversity, inclusion. There's so many words out there, right? And it's in many spaces where Dr. Holt and I work is often when you say the word like equity, it's like a bomb, right? It's like a curse word actually. And often what that says is that, you know, in some places, there's even in other states where this work that Dr. Holt and I do, we wouldn't be able to do as consultants. Okay, there are things that have been banned and been outlawed because of just context of a word that may be misunderstood. And so I say that because often what has happened is it hasn't been a safe space to talk about uncomfortable conversations. So what we often like to do in spaces like this, and we encourage you to use this process when you're doing your own individual work within your workspace, within the community, is ensuring that you have some agreements about how we're going to do this work together, especially if it's uncomfortable. So you can see on the screen, it says moving from safe to brave space. Right, so safe is that we're all in this room and we're not going to be blamed or shamed or attacked personally, professionally, but that we all have a voice that matters in this space, but also recognize the brave part is that we are going to listen and stay in this moment when it is uncomfortable. And safety and comfort are two different things, right? And sometimes they can be confused at times. When we talk about discomfort, that is a moment where we often have to think about emotionally it might be uncomfortable, mentally because it's something I just don't understand, I've never learned, or it's just different from my experience. You can notice there's a picture on the left side, the elephant and the blind man or blind man elephant. It's a poem that was adapted from a parable. And that particular poem actually speaks about 6 people who are like arguing, debating about this elephant. And they all have blind spots, right? Because they only have their lived perspective. And in the poem, as they're arguing and debating about the elephant, right, they're grabbing on the tail, and the tail's a rope, and the ear is a fan, and the leg is a tree trunk. And you see they're all wrong. However, the poem also illustrates they're all right. And what that means is that everyone has a different perspective, and that's okay. Different is not wrong. Different is just different. Right? And so this work sometimes becomes elephant blind man experience, is that we're all trying to figure out how to get to something that we all really, I think, agree upon. We agree that everyone should have fairness, right? Yeah, Yeah. It depends on how we define it. Yeah. Respect. Oh my goodness. Everyone defines that differently. So this is why conversations need to happen so that we can better understand how we get to that place of unpacking that elephant, which is very large, right? And so we're going to start by using forums like this to just take a little bite at a time, right, at that elephant, unpack it. So the 4 agreements, I'm going to ask that we all agree to participate and really figure out a way to lean into these 4. So the first is to stay engaged. So we're going to ask you to think about what that looks like, sounds like, and feels like to stay engaged, to lean in, right? You're going to hear different perspectives. You may feel any discomfort. The reality is we want you to stay engaged versus what we do when we disengage is, right, we walk out the door, or we just kind of shut down mentally or even physically. And we don't want to do that in a space where we're all trying to learn together. So I'm going to ask you to try to stay engaged, okay? Especially our folks on Zoom. It's hard to engage when you're on Zoom. Y'all remember that? Ooh, that was an agreement just in itself, right? Stay engaged, right? The other is experience discomfort, okay? And so we ask that you actually lean into the discomfort. That's where the growth happens, okay? That's where the growth happens, is that we learn something different, a new perspective. And so that's where we often say you have to lean into the discomfort and be comfortable with it, actually. The third, speak your truth. So everyone in here has an amazing perspective story. We're going to ask that you share it. That's what today is for, is speak your truth. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable because people's truth may be different, right? And so this is a forum that's all about speak your truth. Why is it so important? Is that's how we get to learn again. We can never get to a space of full understanding if we don't hear people's stories and understand everybody's story is different, okay? But ultimately it's about staying engaged when that truth happens. But understanding number 4, which is that you're going to leave out of here and not have solved all the world's problems, right? You're going to try. Not all of Lake County's problems. But the reality is that you're going to leave out and we won't have all the answers yet, okay? Because it is a journey, okay? I stand on my ancestors' shoulders knowing what they fought, bled, and died for. But they didn't get to see all the full closure of their work, right? But I also know that there's going to be some non-closure right away, that you're going to have some work that you're going to want to do. There's recommendations the committee will have. There will be things that are short, medium, long-term range, right? So you won't see everything tomorrow. And that has to be something we accept. So that's going to push some of our discomfort because some of us are like, I can't go to bed if I don't have that box checked off, right? Y'all know who you are. It's not going to be wrapped up in a beautiful bow and voila, we've officially, closed those gaps of injustices, and that just it's that this type of work is about changing systems. It's about changing community, and that does take time. Okay, so can we agree to our 4 agreements? All right. And so as a facilitator, we're going to push you in those spaces, but it is important that we do agree to those as we move into our conversation today. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the conversation. So the couple of images just to get your brains thinking about what we're going to talk about. Okay, so I love imagery first, and then we're going to give some actual dictionary definitions of what this work's about. So you can see that there's often the images you see on the left, which are the kids at the baseball game looking over the fence, right, trying to see the game. And so as we're unpacking these words, sometimes the visuals help us think about where we're going. And so we use the example of equity and equality. That's pretty popular words. We look at how it looks for us to think of our community as those different brilliant, amazing people who are trying to see the game. And they're all different heights, right? They all have different needs. They're all brilliant. They all have gifts and talents and skills, right? Would you agree every community member has gifts, talents, and skills? Absolutely. Nothing wrong with the community members. But that fence kind of sends a message, right? That if you're too short, you can't see over the fence. And so equality is where we're thinking about how does this look in our community, where our community is getting the resources maybe they need or not. Maybe we have a finite amount of resources and we're giving everyone the same. And that may not work for everyone. So part of our listening here is going to help us think about, well, how do we know people's needs? Because equality doesn't necessarily work. Okay, we have one slide, we call it reality, which there's one person who has way more boxes than the shorter person looking. Equity is more about what we are trying to get to a space of, and I think in this space now we have a finite amount of boxes to give people, right? That could be food, that could be money, it could be any form of resources, right? But the reality is that giving them what they need is ultimately what the spirit of this work is about. And everyone may not quite understand that in our community, what that means. because my need may be very different from someone else. The two at the bottom, inclusion, belonging, right? These are words that are going to come up today. And notice there's a fence now that has been knocked down. And I think that's the work you all are going to try to unpack in Lake County is how do we take that barrier away, right? So that we don't have to keep playing these games with these boxes, right? Knowing that our boxes are finite, right? Those of you on the board of supervisors, you know you don't have an abundance of resources, that you can just solve these problems by just having an abundance, right? Right? And most of spaces, we don't have that. But the reality is that we want to get to a space of removing those barriers, okay? And so we're going to unpack these today. But ultimately, I'll often have to remember our research from Maslow's, right? The hierarchy of needs, that I don't care what color, what language, any demographic that we have about our citizens, everybody needs Maslow's. I haven't met a human being that doesn't apply to. And that sometimes helps change the conversation. We talk about how do we do this type of work. Every human being needs food, shelter, clothing, right? Yeah, and no one's at fault for not having that, okay? So we got to definitely think about how do we ensure that our community has that first. And so let's talk about the words, and then we're going to have you all have a conversation. So the words that we're going to talk about particularly are respect, fairness, and inclusion. And just a couple of definitions just to give you a little context. Hey, I'm going to ask Alan, if you don't mind, it's behind you, actually in front of you. Can you read the word respect? What would that mean in that definition? Can you read that for us? Please.
Get up to do that. Giving consideration, attention, or admiration of people while taking that person's perspective or experience into account.
How's that sound? Sound pretty much like the word respect? Yep. Now we could say, give us some examples, right? And to your point, say your first name again. Margie. To your point, that word could mean something very different depending on who we're talking to, huh? Exactly. Yeah. And so the dictionary definition is one thing, right? Or I should say not dictionary, but University of Pittsburgh, versus when I say what respect looks like to me from a cultural lens, it still turns out that you are taking into consideration my experience, right? You admire it, you consider it, okay? And so we're going to unpack that today. Fairness. Margie, since I called on you, can I pick on you to do fairness?
Sure. Well, I can't read it.
I'm challenging everyone, huh?
The DMV.
Margie, let me give you this too. I forgot one rule.
Okay. Fairness. Fair does not mean equal, even though equal opportunity for equal benefit is central to its meaning. Fairness does not mean that everybody gets what they want. Rather, it means that everybody in the group has an equal opportunity to benefit. And that has the reference, which I don't.
Yeah, that's the Jewish out of Chicago. Yeah, out of Chicago. So interesting dynamic. I mean, one more. Interesting dynamic, that equal opportunity to benefit. There's that word equal. But we said equal wasn't necessarily good, right? But equal means everybody can see over that fence. Equal opportunity, right? That's what's fair. Not that everyone just gets the same thing. And this is a word that will be tough for people in the community we're thinking about fair. Everyone may not agree with. Okay, I'm going to ask one more to read, inclusion. Sally, you want to do that for me? Sure. Thank you.
Inclusion, the act of creating an environment in which any individual or group will be welcomed, respected, supported, and valued as a fully participating member. An inclusion and welcoming climate embraces and respects differences.
Absolutely. So now it's an act, right? It's not just a concept, right? It's now an act. You can see this in action. Inclusion is a feeling as well. So some of us even thinking about examples of inclusion, right? We often think about representation, right? And some will say, hey, we have representation of different ethnicities or genders in some committee, right? Or in some way we'll talk about diversifying our workforce. Any of you had that going on, right? And the reality is not just about representation, but an act, right? Where that inclusiveness is felt. People are part of a decision-making process, right? And so when we think about respect, fairness, and inclusion, they all are kind of like family, huh? You almost can't do one without the other, right? Because it's one thing to say you have hired me to work in your organization, but then I come to work every day and I don't feel included, right? So that's why we have to ensure that we understand you have to respect me, meaning you have to acknowledge and value who I am, right? So these are all steps that have to happen in order to see these outcomes that we want to see for not only ourselves, but for the entire community. So I'm going to pause for a moment and see if anyone wants to add any perspective to the words respect, fairness, as well as inclusion. Anyone want to add to that perspective?
I was at a meeting the other day with that word, and I think it was Dolores Farrell who said, for inclusion, you're invited to the party, and then also if you're invited to dance at the party, then you're really included.
Yeah. People have used all kinds of great analogies, huh? That's a good one. Invite me to the party, but if I want to dance, I don't want to stand on the wall and watch you dance, right? Or it's almost as being at the table, right? I mean, there's so many ways that people can come up with those analogies. And so do you all as a group feel like we best understand these words before we start our conversation? Because we have some questions we want to ask you, and we want to start that conversation, but we just want to make sure we have context. Yep, any questions?
I'm not sure
Tell me.
I'm not sure what fairness means.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't.
Okay.
Especially in the part where that has an opportunity to benefit. If your viewpoint and your group or whatever, or your individuality is not part of a group culture necessarily of numbers, then the fact that someone has an equal opportunity for nothing that fits them isn't fair.
Powerful. And so I think this is going to be kind of tying into the conversation about inclusion, right, is hearing what is fair to me, right? Because it's one thing to define it for me. And this is really important when we think about decisions we make. Sometimes we can allocate resources, we can put all kinds of things in place, and it actually, our intentions are to really acknowledge and value a culture or value a group. But then the impact, it actually doesn't feel fair, right? I don't feel like I'm benefiting. And that's why these conversations are so important, because we have to have perspective to be able to really define that for and with people. But when we're in a position to make decisions, right, that's why inclusive decision making is so important, so that the concept of fairness is actually felt. Like, am I actually benefiting? Right? And I think that's where also we look at our data and we look at having different ways to really look at how people actually are benefiting.
I just wanted to share, if someone asked me to define these, it would come from an emotional place. It wouldn't come from a dictionary or it just wouldn't. It would come, what do I think inclusion is? I'll remember the time I wasn't included, whether it be, school or family or anything like that. So I think you ask me, it comes from emotional. So for you to have these up for me, I'm absorbing them, and it's going to take more than just the couple minutes.
Absolutely. Well, the good news is our next step is to have you all start talking about it, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to transition into some questions, okay? And our very first question actually is going to go into discussing these words, okay? And so these are the particular questions that have been placed in the flyer when we promoted the forum. And so these are the, I should say, 4 questions we're going to talk about today. In particular, you can see the first question is how do you define those words? So you're going to give some examples and you're going to share with each other. And so what I want to do before we start to have that conversation is we are going to actually have you break these up into 4. You're all going to discuss them kind of separately. We're going to have you actually write and discuss. Then we're going to have you chart and actually report out. Okay, I feel like our table groups are actually pretty good, Joanna. We were wondering about it, right? I think we have this is perfect. And then we have our Zoom space. I think Dr. Holt has a really good number of breakout rooms they can have there. And so what they're going to do is they're going to follow the same process, but in their breakout rooms, we're going to do the same here in our 3 groups. And so the way this is going to work, I'm going to ask that we have a facilitator at each table. Okay, and so I know those of you that are on the committee, you are ones that we want to volunteer, and you all are spread out so much. I think this is perfect. So we're just going to ask one committee member at each table to be a facilitator. So you're going to have the burden of helping to keep the group moving along. Rock, paper, scissors, sometimes that works. I don't have any straws. So who lost? Who won? Who lost? But it looks like it's you, Benai, is what it sounds like. All right, so you're my facilitator. So there's an actual document right in front of you, a little cheat sheet. Do I have a facilitator here? Okay. So first name again, you said it, Georgina. I was going to say Georgina, Georgina. Okay, so you have your cheat sheet there. And then who was the it here? Dale. Okay, Dale was you. All right, perfect. So you're the it. Okay, so I'm going to need you three, okay, to help me with keeping the groups going. So good luck with this, all right, because this is hard. And so the way it's going to work is we also going to need a recorder, okay, someone who can write and really hear the voices at the table, okay? So we have chart paper here, okay? We have plenty of it. But also, we're going to have, I want to give you, you have some sticky notes you have, so that's perfect, because I think it's important that each of you individually be able to write your own notes as well. If you need more sticky notes, let us know. We do want to try to collect those, so I want you to write legibly if possible, okay? All right, those that are going to be on the Zoom room with Dr. Holt, they are going to have a Google Doc to be able to collect their responses. And so their legibility is not as important because they have someone to type that in. Okay, but we're going to need some recorder, so you'll be your own individual recorder where you can write your own notes. And then also we're going to ask that we have one recorder to be able to chart, okay, the responses. Okay, and I'll come around and kind of help you with that part. At the end, we're going to ask that we have a reporter, so someone who can share out. Okay, and this is usually someone who's really good about synthesizing, like it might be the 2-minute drill, it might be the 1-minute drill, depends on when we finish, but you all are going to have a short period of time. So someone who can summarize, okay, so you're going to have to pick someone in that space, okay? Dale, you know who to volunteer? Okay, perfect. All right. And so the way it's going to work, we're going to try to move you along based on where we are in our time frame. We have till 8 o'clock, of course, but we want to make sure we have like the last 15 minutes to try to at least do some share outs, okay? So at this point in time, Dr. Holt, I think you all are going to kind of go into your own Zoom room space. And so if we can plan to come back out, right now it is 6:51, so we can plan, I'm going to do a little time check with you all, at about 7:35. Okay, I'm just going to check on you at 7:35, and we'll start to talk about wrapping up our conversation, but we're going to hit all 4 of those questions, okay? And so we're going to ask facilitator that you move each group through. So after about 6-7 minutes, try to move them to the next question, okay? And in the end, you will all collectively chat about all 4 of these, okay? It's important that as you're responding that everyone gets an opportunity to share. Maybe it is to example of my emotion, I might share from my own experience, okay? But ultimately, we want to get as much perspective as possible, okay? Also, it's not the SAT, so there's no right or wrong answer, all right? No pressure. Okay, so I want to ask, are there any questions first? Questions first.
Right on what the group decides as a common theme for each question?
You will at the end. So we do want to have our recorder actually write out kind of a summary or a synthesis about what those kind of common themes were for each question. But again, you may, depending on how you take notes, you may want to use the chart paper to chart a few things and then give us like the clean version when it's time, okay? But you have whatever you need to record, okay? Good question. Any other questions?
Are we just putting sticky notes on those?
So as you're recording, writing your sticky notes is great, and placing it on there is fine as well at the end of your conversation, okay? So you may have a bunch of sticky notes going, it gets pretty messy, right? No throwing notes at anybody. But at the end of the day, yes, having it on one sheet is great because then we would love to see those individual responses too, okay? So typically if you just put it on just one sheet for question 1, question 2, question 3, and that way we can keep those separate. And again, try to write as legibly as you can. Okay, Dr. Holt and I are pretty good about reading handwriting all these years, but as legibly as you can. All right, questions? All right, so for our folks watching on live stream and on YouTube, Facebook, we're going to pause for a moment. We will ask that you participate by putting your phone up to the QR code, and we would love to hear your responses as well in our Survey Monkey. And again, we have that in English, and then we will also place the questions in Spanish as well in a moment. But again, we will be going into group discussions, so we will be paused momentarily, but hope that anyone who is not in either Zoom or in person can actually take the survey by clicking on the QR code, and it should be 4 questions that pop up in Spanish and in English. Okay, so I'll say one more time. For those that are on the Facebook Live or YouTube, if you'd like to put your phone facing the QR code, a Survey Monkey will pop up with these same 4 questions that we would love for you to participate and respond to. And your camera, yes, so if you don't know, so QR code, you would just use your camera to take almost a picture and just point your camera at the QR code and the survey will pop up. There will be a little yellow link that will say click on the survey. Por favor.
Buenas tardes para todos aquellos que nos están visitando por Facebook o por YouTube. La siguiente sesión va a ser responder estas preguntas que se ven aquí en español. Lo pueden lograr mediante una encuesta, apuntando su teléfono con la cámara abierta al código QR que se encuentra en la esquina superior a la derecha de las diapositivas. Esa imagen los llevará a la encuesta que tendrá las mismas preguntas en español a las cuales usted podrá responder.
All right, my friends. All right. Excellent work, excellent work. I want to thank you all for just taking some time to discuss our 4 questions. And so those that were on the Facebook Live and YouTube, hopefully you were able to contribute with the survey. And also we will have an opportunity to ensure that our community who speaks Spanish will be able to also hear a live recorded version of this as well.
Muchas gracias por aquellos que participaron en la encuesta mediante YouTube o Facebook. También vamos a asegurarnos de que una grabación de esta junta sea disponible mediante Facebook y YouTube para aquellas personas que hablan español.
All right, so the way this is going to work, we are going to be closing out. Looks like our breakout rooms, are they all ready to go, Dr. Holt? I see you shaking your head. All right. So what we're going to do, we have 2 breakout rooms in our Zoom space, and then we have 3 here in this room. And so what we're going to do is what we call kind of the football version, the end of the game, right? And it's time to win, and it's usually the quarterback is like, you got 2 minutes, right? Well, guess what you get? You're going to really have to win this. You got 1 minute. Okay, and part of it because we want to have a collective kind of share out, but we want to hear each group and just some themes for each of your questions. Okay, themes for each of your questions. And so I'm going to ask for our Zoom friends if we can have our breakout room number 1, if we have our person ready to go, our reporter.
Thank you, Lisa, for leading breakout room number 1. Did you decide on who your reporter is going to be?
All right, we ready? Don't be shy. But we want
I know,
to hear.
right? Let's see. Who is it? Kate Schmidt-Hopper. Are you ready?
So 1 minute drill. Sharing out.
Trying to see where she is.
What about breakout room 2? Do we want to go back to number 1 later? Breakout room 2, are they ready?
Let's come back. It's actually breakout room 3.
Got it.
Breakout room 3, that was David Geck. Why don't you go ahead and summarize the themes for those 4 questions for us, please, sir?
Okay, go ahead. What was the question again? What is he going to
David was
report on?
going to summarize, be our reporter. So he has 1 minute to kind of summarize what we talked about with those 4 questions, the themes.
In a nutshell.
Okay, well, I think we went through those questions. I think looking at the first one about respect, fairness, and inclusion, we looked at ways to define it for ourselves. And so I don't have a copy of, what the recorder, has. So I'm just going to kind of remember kind of what happened there. So, and I think like for respect, it really kind of depends on,
There it is.
all right, you took care of it for me. Thank you.
And 1 minute.
Okay, it's individual and personal issues about defining respect. We talked about, what gets in the way of going down, looking at fairness. It had to do with equal access, getting what they need, how to make up for, unfairness. I think, you want to scroll down, Rose?
There you go.
Okay, and then in terms of inclusion.
I don't have control.
Yes, you
Somebody
do.
else's.
Okay, being able to speak your truth, to be accepted, participation, able to participate. And then we came up with an interesting concept about losing the fear of being able to, of sharing, being made aware, of, you're right, of that particular issue about, you're afraid to share it so you don't feel included that way. Looking at the second question, what's getting in the way of you receiving what you need? We talked about resources, medical resources, lack of housing, looking at housing, also lack of education, fact that we don't have a robust education system, and because we're rural, so you don't have strong vocational training, in addition to trying to, get our students ready for, college and careers. I think, are we over to number 3? I think looking at what has to be overcome, I think looking at generational, being able to be aware of generational poverty, there's a lack of trust because of cultural differences. I think, let's see, I'm looking down here.
Capture some great ones. I think this is great. That's perfect. And thanks for sharing, Dr. Hull, so we could see some of the responses. These are powerful. I want to see the first breakout room. Are they ready to share out?
Breakout room 1, Kate,
Thank
are
you,
you
David.
there?
We appreciate that. All right, breakout 1. You want to go jump in? 1 minute drill.
Okay.
Kate,
are you available?
Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead and take it. That way we can move through them. I'm not sure what may have happened to Kate.
Okay,
It's really quick.
We looked at respect and fairness, life, being heard, mostly being heard, being seen. Everyone has the same chance for success, treated with equality, understanding of other cultures, remedies for wrongdoing, respect for other living things, the right to habitat free of pain and suffering, accepting the other person and not trying to shame them, seeing and accepting the other person for who they are, being welcomed into the circle, being part of the story and conversation for inclusion. Then resources, we talked about conflicts over limited resources, money, safety concerns, criminal elements. How do we feel safe when there's not sufficient amount of police, actually, public transportation and its limitations, the limitations of higher education, where it's located and our access based on even the evening classes for workers, public transportation stops before the classes are over. Feelings of isolation in rural areas, feelings of not being accepted, limited cultural, recreational choices, shopping, places for entertainment, parks, etc. Health services, lack of specialists, itinerant healthcare providers, which keeps us from being able to develop relationships with our healthcare providers. Question number 3, first, to acknowledge, change the name of Kelseyville, acknowledge that the native were here and are still here. Naming with respect to the area, in other words, giving some native names to some of the places. Reframing historical literature to acknowledge the people who were first here, acknowledging wrongdoing in the pollution of Clear Lake and how it's happening. Not covering things up, recognition for agricultural workers and acknowledging that there are disparities based on, there have been and are disparities based on race, color, and language in school. And then for question 4, what would support all Lake County residents feeling respected, included, and experiencing fair outcomes? Highlighting success of underrepresented people, ensuring there are not disparities based on race or color or language in school. Mentorships, volunteers, teachers who are people of color representing underrepresented groups. Community to provide opportunities, connect with others, reach our goals, make us feel safe and secure. For underrepresented communities, having underrepresented communities at the tables to be heard, build more exclusive community when people are young, so the curriculum needs to be changed and more and volunteers to support that. Health issues, public spaces, more ADA compliant spaces, raising awareness to basic safety needs, including more patrol points for police, being invited, everyone realizing that the Native people are still here, translation resources. Thank you for that.
Excellent. Powerful, powerful. Thank you. Good discussions. Wow. Some of you, they stole your answers, huh? So that's what I could hear them. You stole some good answers in the room, so let's see what they have. So I'm going to have you all start first, right, in the back. Dale, they did all right? Did they follow directions? They did. Okay, good, good. All right, so 1 minute drill, go.
All right, so the first question was answered with many different comments, and one being we need to build trust to answer some of that, to offer hospitality.
My apologies, we do need that microphone.
Apologies.
PSL,
We didn't
correct.
follow directions. He lost his 30 seconds.
You will
Sorry,
not get
rewind
to
that.
reclaim your time. No.
All right, take 2. All right, so answers to question 1 for us are to start building trust, offer hospitality, also let people be who they are. Some people aren't going to want to be included with things, but we have to respect them and allow them to be who they are. The golden and the platinum rule: treat people as they want to be treated. Listen to everything, even that is which is not said, because there's a lot of body language included as well. So realize everyone is someone's son, daughter, or family member. So at times you can honor that and appreciate the differences in everybody. Question 2. Some people really didn't feel like they had they felt like they didn't have the needs as much. However, the fact that some of our neighbors, some of our friends do not have the resources because they don't have adequate health care, adequate mental health care, behavioral health care, things of that nature. There's resources that aren't available to people, so it puts everyone else in a position to where needs aren't being met. Whether it be the fact that they're living in a tent and some of them don't have nowhere to go, so or they're putting garbage out that's making other people have to do more, things like that. So it all affects all of us, and so that in the trauma, some of the people's trauma hasn't been addressed, so they're just hurt, and so it affects all of us. Question 3. What history, of course, that's the history question, and everyone has their own story and truth. We're all different, yet the same. Epigenetics was brought up. We need to honor each other's pain. There's also this tendency where people, just kind of don't care about each other, and we need to, get back to something to where we understand and empathize with people's stories and history. History isn't something that everybody agrees with. Some people have their differences in what it is, a perspective, We have to understand the history so it is not repeated. There was a mention about the name of Kelseyville as well. And Another comment was to have tribal people speak to non-tribal groups to give them an understanding of how a perspective from a Native American is. And I think to add along that, that goes with every other ethnicity that had to come to this country regardless, to give their perspective, you know? And so well, question 4, I'll go with that. Everyone needs great internet. That was one. Everyone needs nutrition and have the opportunity to share. Housing for all. And basically, the biggest answer is question 4 is the answer to question 1. Take the definition and terms and turn them into action. Did I say that right? Yes. All right.
love it.
So that's that. That's
All
my
right. Yeah, good stuff. I got some good notes here. All right. All right. Sally, you all ready to share out? All right. Good work.
Okay, so our group on question 1, the themes for respect was valuing and acknowledging worldviews and perspectives. For fairness, equal opportunities, knowing we do not start from the same place. Inclusion, all starts as one, we're all in. So those were our main themes. And you guys jump in from the same place. They told me what to write.
They'll cut into your minute,
Yeah.
they jump in.
Question 2, recognizing the historical trauma, internal emotional traumas, basic needs being met, lack of opportunities, need more state and federal support, low-income communities, a lot of homelessness, and our geographic isolation were our common themes. And then question 3, everyone's history is important. Emphasis on positive, not negatives. Trauma must be acknowledged. Honor and restore our land and its symbolisms. Clear, we said our Clear Lake is not really clear anymore. And that we need to honor the land, the mountains, and and all of that. And then we also talked about the name Kelseyville and what that meant to many of us. And then question 4, we talked about wraparound services. There's a program that one of our participants talked about called No Wrong Door. Collaborative without taking advantage. Coming together during emergencies. We all saw in like the wildfires, we all came together as communities, and we need to do that all the time.
Yeah. Powerful. Wow. Powerful. Y'all keep adding on. It's amazing. Wow. All right, last but not least. So George, all right.
We never chose our reporter.
You're it, Georgina. All right.
Okay, so for respect, we talked about being allowed to be an individual, listening and accepting, not being treated differently for ethnicity or gender, and overall being compassionate towards others. For fairness, we talked about being treated equally, offering the same opportunities to those that want them. And for inclusion, being open to others' perspectives and affording space to those, to those perspectives, creating a sense of welcoming. You can certainly invite people into a space, but if you're not making it welcoming, then it's beside the point. Barriers to meeting needs include inclusion, lack of a sense of belonging, labels, not enough providers, language equity, misperceptions, lack of awareness, medical murder cartels, which is basically speaking to the healthcare system, lack of empathy and compassion, not enough public transportation and affordable housing, as well as inadequate housing. Thank you, Wendy. As far as history to be acknowledged, we talked about how people were wrong and how people did wrong, acknowledging both sides of history, acknowledging recent history as well, not just what happened centuries ago, but what might have happened a few years ago. History of ageism and sexism, the extermination of Native Americans, internment camps of Asian Americans, children sent to tribal schools, slavery, missing and murdered Indigenous people, historical trauma and generational impacts, and religious persecution. And lastly, in terms of support, Anna mentioned the murals, which help to create a sense of belonging and diversity. Community events where everyone is welcome and accepted, events that are geared towards children to change perspectives from a young age, be more inclusive, remove judgment and misperceptions, act from a place of love, and treat others like you want to be treated.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Wow, wow, wow. Wow, this is amazing. So you heard 2 breakout rooms, right? 3 rooms here, and you heard very different perspectives, yet a collective understanding about these 4 questions. Now, we could keep going for another 4 hours, right? We can come back and do this again, and you can see how deep this would go. Notice some of the themes as well. As Dr. Holt kind of look at collecting like your responses and all of your sticky notes that should be going with your charts. One of the things you'll find is some themes that keep coming up, right? And so I think when in your future forums, these are opportunities to continue the conversation. These are opportunities to continue the conversation even in your workspace, in your community. This forum in itself is an amazing time to like go deep into this conversation as a collective community, but the conversation can't stop here. I think if we kept going, we'd go into solutions, right? In ways that we can really start to impact some of these amazing, I mean, there's a lot of action steps you all did actually identify. But as we know, for those who are on the committee, to create change and sustainable change, I think is what we're really here for. So it's one thing to say, hey, Board of Supervisors, we have these great ideas, right? And you're like, all right, we're going to adopt these great ideas. We're going to approve them. And then 2 years later, we're still in the same space. And we're at this table having the same conversation, and nothing has changed. And so we want to really employ you to think about what do we do next is one, continue to do some of the things I heard you say, right, is really hear voices, right? Continue to take those perspectives. And you all have different spaces that you're working within the county where you can create spaces like this, right? Some have employee resource groups. Some have committees they create. And so this conversation is one great way to start the data collection process, but also think about there are some voices missing in here, right? And I think all of us can acknowledge that we come from spaces where we have possibly the resources, we have access, we have agency for things that many of our community members don't. And so one of the things we're going to have to do is continue to create space for those who have no voice to find ways to honor that in the most non-traditional ways, by the way. I think I heard fear, right? Fear of even speaking my truth. That is a real thing. And so as you even do this work, you're going to have to continue to create safe space for people to share their truth and also recognize that, again, I'm not going to be blamed or shamed for it, right? Or attacked for it. But I'm going to be acknowledged and respected for it because it's my perspective, but also where I lack support, where I lack those needs, that someone's going to do something about it. And those are very different conversations to have. And so as we're closing out, I know that you're going to have some next steps as a committee. We have 2 more of these, right? You can see that if you take just a couple of these themes and keep this conversation going, you can continue to go deeper and deeper. There are some surveys that you can develop out of these same themes that came up through all of the breakout rooms. And so we still have work to do. We still have data to collect, right? We still have relationships to build. I acknowledge what you said, even like building trust to even share our responses, right? That in itself is a process. And by the way, it is an action step. Some people don't think it is. It doesn't always show up tangibly on a piece of paper that you've created trust in your community, even have a discussion about acknowledging history, acknowledging harm. That in itself is a huge step. So I just want to congratulate you all on that. Dr. Holt and I get to do these quite a bit, but not enough are doing this. And so as a county, you're doing this. Like in your individual cities, you can continue this work. In your spaces, I acknowledge and appreciate you bringing up the young people and about education. Because remember, the wellness of a community, usually it centers around who's most well is your kids. If your kids aren't well, like that's a cultural nuance, that's a community nuance, but our kids have to be well, right? So we know we have some work to do, okay? And so I want to have some closing comments, if that's all right, and just allow you all to talk about next steps and also make sure that our community, I don't know if we want to repeat what we said earlier about our community and what will be available next for closing out and following up with our Spanish-speaking community. So if you want to go right ahead.
Para los que hablan español, nomás se les informa que Esta junta ha sido grabada y será transmitida por Facebook y YouTube eventualmente. Y aparte se les invita a participar en un foro similar, es el mismo foro, la misma plática, el próximo mayo, el 15 de mayo, perdón, es un lunes. ¿Es a 6 p.m.? A las 6 de la tarde, de 6 a 8. Y de igual manera, el 5 de junio, también es un lunes, de 6 a 8. Entonces habrá 2 más oportunidades para poder participar en persona, aquí en lo que es la Corte, en la Cámara de los Supervisores. Y de igual manera, virtualmente, en un enlace Zoom, hay que registrarse. La información está en Facebook y en los volantes. Gracias.
Thank you so much. All right, and so we're going to have some closing comments and looking forward to, again, helping to support the facilitation of the dialogue. Thank you again for just the honor to join your community. I don't live here, and so I do recognize that it is a blessing for me to be invited to share the space in a community where I don't necessarily live, but definitely have spent time and resources here in many years of my life, but want to just appreciate you and see you again on May 15th and June 5th. And I'm going to just challenge you to do one thing, is to bring more with you, right? Their voice is missing, and to ensure them that this is a safe place to have a discussion, right? Like, I think that's important to recognize. So thank you for staying engaged, experiencing a little discomfort, right? Not too bad, little discomfort, for speaking your truth. And most importantly, as we get ready to close out, there's a lot of non-closure that you have to accept. And I told you had to expect it, because we have work to do, right? But thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you, Dr. Holt, and to the team on Zoom. Thank you so much. And so I'm going to pass this virtual mic so you can give us some closing thoughts and just appreciate your leadership and inspiration.
All right. Well, thank you everyone again for coming together to this monumental event of discussing a very difficult topic, a very challenging topic to face it. I think the biggest thing that we all can do to make this county better and make our environment better is to have the hard discussions and respect one another and understand with empathy that we all come from a place where we need to be understood so we can move forward and get to a common ground and take care of some solutions if we can address those. Rather it be just respecting and coming together, or agreeing to disagree and moving forward towards the solutions. So I'll end with that. And again, the next meeting is on May 15th, and then I heard Spanish, June 5th. Yes, I heard Junio, but I didn't hear Cinco, but that was me. So yes, just a note of history. May 15th is the anniversary to the Bloody Isle Massacre. So it's going to be a good day. Badunapati, yes, that's what the island is called. That was our island of refuge, where we would send families to gather. Of course, during that specific time, it was where we sent our elders, women, and children, because there was a preconceived battle that might have been coming forward. So the rest is history, but that's what the island means to us, Badunapati. So yeah, looking forward to see you all then, and again, have a blessed evening, and look forward to the next time.
Excellent. Thank you all. And so before you